Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Sports Talk. My name is Jonah. Now, it's been a while since I've done one of these, but with college football and the NFL starting back up, I figured I might as well jump back into them, get a few videos out. Now, this video will be a college football prediction video, and hopefully sometime before Thursday, I will have an NFL one out. But in this video will be about this coming college football season and how I think it will go down. So I'll go through the Power 5 conferences, tell you who I think is going to win, give you some reasons why. Also look at some potential games in which they might trip up in or lose, and then a few dark horses for each conference as well. So the first conference that I will start with is the ACC. Now, for those of you who follow the sport, my prediction as to who will win this conference should come as no surprise, and that is Clemson. Now, Clemson is the reigning national champion. They did beat Alabama last year and returned quite a few starters this year. They did lose some nice talent, especially on their defense to the NFL draft, but with them being in the top 10 or top 5 in the last few years, they've recruited very well and have talent really all over the place. So including Trevor Lawrence, who is probably the Heisman frontrunner coming into this season. He's definitely one of the better quarterbacks college football has seen since potentially Andrew Luck came out a few years ago. And they just, again, have lots of talent everywhere. I think their schedule is also pretty easy. Their toughest game will be, or the two toughest games will be against Texas A&M and Syracuse, who they actually play within the next 2 weeks. Texas A&M, who's currently ranked 12th, comes to town next week. Now that'll be a very good game. Texas A&M, as I said, is always a very solid team. SEC teams are always pretty good. And then week 3, they do play Syracuse. They do travel to Syracuse. Now Syracuse surprised a lot of people last year. I believe they went 9-3, so they had a pretty good season. They are ranked 22nd at the moment, so have potentially a good chance at tripping up Clemson. Syracuse was the last team to beat them at home a few seasons ago. Now, my dark horses for the conference, or for winning the conference, Syracuse is one of them. I think if they can beat Clemson, then they should have a pretty good chance at winning the division. And then the other one would be Virginia. Now, I should say that the ACC is divided up into two divisions, as a lot of the Power 5 conferences are. So I think Clemson will win one of the divisions, and then the other division, I'm going to pick Virginia to win that one. Now, Virginia, kind of like Syracuse, surprised a lot of people last year. They have not been very good for the majority of the last 10 to 15 years, so it's fun to see them doing well. Their toughest game will be week 5 against Notre Dame, but outside that, I think they have a good shot at winning the division. Now, I think either Syracuse or Virginia have the firepower or talent to hang with Clemson? No, not really, but it is college football, so you never know what'll happen. So that'll be fun to watch. And then, moving on, we have the Big 12. Now, I think the Big 12 will really be a two-race team, and I think that'll be Oklahoma and Texas. Now, my dark horse for that conference is Iowa State, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Oklahoma and Texas, last year they played twice, 2 very good games. Both really came down to the last minute. Texas won the first one in the regular season on a last-second field goal, and then Oklahoma won the Big 12 championship rematch with a touchdown in the last few minutes. That was a really good game. But I'm going to give the edge to Oklahoma. They did lose Kyler Murray, who was the number 1 pick in the NFL draft, but they replaced him with Jalen Hurts, who was a 3-year starter, I believe, at Alabama, led them to multiple SEC championships and playoff appearances. I believe they did win a national championship with him at the helm, but he was replaced with Tua Tagovailoa, who we'll talk about later. But he comes in, replaces Murray. They have a lot of talent on offense. They also do have an easier schedule compared to Texas. Texas does have LSU at home this coming week. LSU is a very good SEC team. They're currently ranked 6th. Texas is ranked 10th, so that would be a very fun game to watch. And then at week 10, Texas does go to Iowa State. And now, as I mentioned, Iowa State is my dark horse for this conference. I'm not feeling so good about that now. after watching them this last week, they really struggled with Northern Iowa, who is not a very good team. They're not even really in the main Division One, not really conference, but not really in the main Division One section for football. And they went to triple overtime with them, barely beat them. So that should give their fans some concern, but hopefully they're turning around. But I do not see them beating either Texas or Oklahoma. It'd be fun to see them do that, but I don't think that'll happen. All right, moving on to the Pac-12. Now, this conference might be the toughest to pick the winner in, as there are 4 teams that I think have a good shot at winning this conference, and those teams are Oregon, Washington, Washington State, and Utah. Now, looking at their schedules, I think Washington will end up winning this conference, and that is because all of their tough games, so all the games that they play against ranked opponents, they have all of those at home. Now, with Utah, I think they have the second best chance of winning it. They do avoid Oregon, which is good for them. They get Washington State at home in week 5. However, they do have to travel to Washington, and I think that'll be one of the games, if not the game, that decides who really wins this conference. Now, the Pac-12 is divided into divisions, so there's a Pac-12 championship game. But I think that'll really give you an idea of who will potentially win that championship game. Utah, I just mentioned them. Oregon, if you watch last night's game, you'll see that they lost to Auburn in the last minute. So it's not a good start to the season for them. They also do have to play at Stanford, who is another very good Pac-12 team. They played at Stanford in week 4, and then they do have to go to Washington in week 7. And then Washington State probably has the toughest draw out of all 4 teams. They do have to play all the other 3 teams on the road. Now, Washington State is ranked. I believe they're ranked 23rd. They do have a very good offense, but whether that offense and their defense will be able to keep them in games, we'll have to see. But yeah, for the conference, I am picking Washington. So who can ever win the majority, or with those 4 teams playing each other, who can ever win the majority of those games, I think will win the conference. And right now, I think that is Washington. All right, moving on to the SEC. Now, if you're a fan of college football, my prediction should not surprise you. I am picking Alabama to win this division. Now, in the last few years, as far as Nick Saban has been coach, Alabama has sent a lot of players to the NFL draft. And every year you're thinking, all right, they lost this player, so maybe they'll take a step back. But every year it seems like they replace their talent with other talents. So it really doesn't matter who they lose. Every year they're good. They do return Tua Tagovailoa, as I mentioned before, who did win the starting job last year and led them to a national championship experience, or championship game. They did lose, but he's still definitely one of the he and Trevor Lawrence are probably the 2 best quarterbacks in the country. Now, Alabama did lose their starting middle linebacker, so it'll be interesting to see how that affects them. They did just beat Duke yesterday, 42-3. Now, Duke isn't a great football school, but they're not too bad. So for Alabama fans, it's probably a good showing. And as I mentioned before, they're just super talented all over the board. Now, some potential slip-up games. There are games that I think will challenge them. In week 6, they do go to Texas A&M. Texas A&M is known as one of the toughest places to play in college football, and they've had some good games over the years. At home in week 9, they do face LSU. Now, this is probably maybe outside of Auburn and Alabama. This is probably the marquee matchup that everyone looks forward to within the SEC every year. Now, Alabama has won the majority of the games in the last few years, but this one's always hyped, always a really fun primetime game to watch. And then finally, in week 12, they do go to Auburn. Now, as I mentioned just a little bit ago, this is probably one of the marquee matchups within the SEC every year. Auburn is a very good team. They just did beat Oregon last night, 27-21. And they've battled Alabama really well over the last few years. They've given us some of the best college football games within the last 5-10 years. The Kick Six, the game in which Cam Newton played in. So those are always fun to watch. I think that will be a very marquee matchup down the road. All right, now second, I think Georgia. I'm picking Georgia. Now Alabama is in the West and Georgia is in the East. Now they do have a conference championship game. I think Alabama will win the West and then Georgia will win the East. Now the two teams did meet last year in the SEC championship. It was looking good for Georgia up until Jalen Hurts entered the game for Alabama and then came from behind to beat Georgia. So Georgia was heartbroken for the second year in a row. But I think they do return their starting quarterback, Jake Fromm, who's pretty good. Revenge is definitely on their minds, definitely looking to get back to that SEC championship game and finally beat Alabama. They do have 3 of their 4 toughest games at home against Notre Dame, Florida, and Texas A&M. Their one tough road game is against Auburn, so that could be potential upset. Well, not necessarily an upset, but a potential loss. And then dark horses, similar to most seasons, Auburn, LSU, and Texas A&M will all have good seasons. They'll all be ranked for the majority of the year, if not the entire year. But whether they have enough talent to beat Georgia and Alabama remains to be seen. I don't think so, based off my predictions, but it'll be fun to watch. That's always a very entertaining conference to pay attention to. Okay, and then finally we have the Big Ten. Now, as many of you know, I am a Wisconsin fan, born and raised. And this really pains me to say, but I have Ohio State winning this conference. Ohio State has won the conference majority of the times within the last 10 to 15 years. Really been a storied program their entire existence. But I think they'll be at the top again by the end of the season. I think Michigan will come in second. With Ohio State, though, like I said, lots of talent. They do have a freshman quarterback who did transfer from Georgia, so maybe the nerves will get to him a little bit. Yesterday in the game against Florida Atlantic, they didn't seem to, but again, it's Florida Atlantic, so maybe against those games, like against Wisconsin or Michigan, it'd be interesting to see how that pressure gets to them. They do have 3 of their 5 ranked games at home. And then their biggest game will be at Michigan Week 12. It's always a fun game to watch. Ohio State's dominated that rivalry for the last few years. As a Big Ten fan, I hope that Michigan can pull it off, but at the moment, I don't see them doing that. With Michigan, I do predict them to get second within the East. They do return their starting quarterback, Shea Patterson, who had a good season last year. Didn't beat Ohio State, though. It's probably the reason that he returned. They do have 4 out of their 6 ranked games at home. Should be good for them, including the one against Ohio State. However, I don't think they beat Ohio State, unfortunately, but that's my prediction. And then with the West might be the most balanced division in college football, in my mind. So in the West, you have Iowa, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Northwestern, and Minnesota, who are all really good teams. I think it will come down to either Iowa, Wisconsin, or Nebraska. And as non-biased as I can say this, I do think Wisconsin will win this division. We do have Jonathan Taylor, who's arguably the best running back in the country. 3 out of the 5 ranked games are at home. So they get Michigan, Iowa, and Michigan State. However, they do travel to Ohio State, which is not an easy task at all. But I think we can squeak ahead of Iowa. Iowa is a very balanced team, but 4 out of their 5 ranked games are on the road. So they have to travel to Iowa State, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Nebraska. Now, I do think they will win some of those games, but I don't think they will win all of them. And then with Nebraska, I could definitely see them winning this division. I don't think they will. I think they're still a little young, especially on the offensive side of the ball. But all of their ranked games are at home. They get Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Iowa. So a very good chance to upset some of the better teams in the conference. But again, their youth, I don't think they will win. I think they will be up there. I predict them to get 3rd. And then with Minnesota, if I had made this video last weekend, I definitely would have considered Minnesota to be a potential sleeper or potential winner of this division. But with their showing against South Dakota State, I no longer think so. They did beat South Dakota State 28-21, but they did not look good doing it. South Dakota State definitely had chances to win that game and probably should have won that game. But Minnesota came out on top, so there's definitely reasons to be concerned there. But they're a talented team, so I think they'll figure it out. But I do not see them beating either Wisconsin, Iowa, or Nebraska. That's just my opinion. All right, so that does it for the Power 5 conferences. Now with my playoff predictions, at the moment I do have currently the top 4 ranked teams making it to the playoff. Now I do have Alabama or Georgia. I think both teams will make it to the SEC championship, but whoever wins that game, I think, will represent the SEC in the playoff. And if they are ranked in the good positions, and potentially both will make it in. But if I were to predict, I would think that only one team, either of those teams, will make it in. Clemson, for sure. I don't see them tripping up at all, except maybe Syracuse, but even then, 11-1 and winning the ACC championship should be good enough to get them into the playoff. Oklahoma, as I said before, Texas is really their only challenge in that, so if they can beat them once or even twice, if they meet again in the Big 12 championship, I don't think they'll have any issues getting in. And then finally, I have Ohio State, as much as it pains me to say. Now, I do believe that Ohio State will be tripped up. It always seems to happen. They always seem to be really good, but there's always that one game in which they lose. Usually get in around 11-1, so I think that'll happen again. Not sure what game it'll be, but I think even similar to Clemson, 11-1 and winning the Big Ten championship potentially, I think will be good enough to get them into the playoffs. Now, will all 4 of these teams be there at the end? Probably not, but this is why this is a predictions video. This is what I think will happen. Definitely won't be what will happen, but that's the fun about making predictions. You get to see how your predictions hold up throughout the season and how wrong you are by the end of it. So it'll be fun to see, kind of look back at the end of the season and see my predictions now versus what actually happens at the end of the year. So I'm looking forward to that. So yeah, that is pretty much the end of the video. Again, I will hopefully come out with an NFL one before Thursday, which is when the season starts. Packers and Bears, go Pack go. But until then, hope you guys have a good rest of your day. If you hung around for the entire video, thanks for hanging, and I will see you guys later.